Hi everyone, I'm Meenakshi and I welcome you all to Tathastu and welcome to our Environment and Ecology series where we are discussing the important concepts of environment, and in fact we have discussed some important concepts which is ecosystem, various functions of ecosystem. And while discussing about various functions of ecosystem, one of the most important function was this nutrient cycle, or popularly we can call them biogeochemical cycle. So we have discussed about these three biogeochemical cycles. I told you that there are four: this carbon cycle, this nitrogen cycle, these both are our gaseous cycle. Then we have phosphorus cycle and sulfur cycle, these both are our sedimentary cycle. So we have discussed three of them. We have solved the questions which have been asked related to all those topics. Today we will be learning about another sedimentary cycle, which is our sulfur cycle. So let's start, but before that, these are the courses which are offered by Tathastu-ICS for all of you. There is MSLV, which specifically targets your mains examination. Then there is NCERT module, you can register yourself for it. Then there is PSLV, which will be launching very soon, and it will specifically target your prelims examination. And then there is philosophy optional. For further inquiries about these courses, if you have any doubt, you can contact on these numbers, as well as you can visit this address, or if you have any further doubt, you can also visit Tathastu's website. And I hope you have got the information. Now let's begin the class, which is about sulfur cycle. So I have already said in the beginning of the video that it is a biogeochemical cycle, right? And it is our sedimentary cycle. So always remember these small facts. These small facts are very important for a prelims examination. Then remember that sulfur cycle is also a sedimentary cycle. We have discussed the gaseous one. Now we are discussing this sedimentary cycle. So it is a sedimentary cycle. Now if we are discussing it, that means this component is also important. See, this component is important. We have discussed about various other components. So this is also important for plants and animals alike, as well as for human beings. For plants, you know, they require this particular sulfur is a component of essential amino acids, and these essential amino acids are required or are essential for the formation of proteins, or the building block of proteins. So we know proteins is required by plants, proteins is required by animals. Proteins are very important for us human beings. That means the road to build these proteins actually require this sulfur. They are required by the several amino acids, and those amino acids are required to build block of several proteins. That is why sulfur is important. So we'll be discussing how the cycle flows, or what are the sources of this sulfur cycle. So basically, when we discussed last three cycles, we have seen there were different sources, right? There were different sources, but almost the procedure from consuming from plants to the upper level in the food chain, the process is same. So we have to remember what is the source. So we will be beginning learning about this sulfur cycle. Let's start. The transport of sulfur in various forms through nature is known as sulfur cycle. So what is sulfur cycle? In simple terms, transport of sulfur in various forms. Forms which can be absorbed by plants, forms which then can be absorbed by animals, forms then which can be taken up by the human beings. That breaking down it into, because there were certain things we have seen that nitrogen couldn't be used directly by plants and animals, right? There need to be a proper process through which the plants and animals could consume it. Similarly, the transfer of sulfur in various forms, the forms which can be consumed by the plants or animals, and that transportation in various forms in nature is known as sulfur cycle. And as I have said, that all living organisms include sulfur, which is a component of several amino acids, and those amino acids are required to build blocks of these proteins, and proteins are important for plants, animals, as well as human beings. Now please focus on this point, that soil is considered the largest sulfur reservoir, then followed by seas, swamps, marshes and volcanoes. So these can be considered the sources from where we can get sulfur. Then there are procedures through which it can be consumed. It can be broken down into the forms which can be absorbed by the plants, because it starts from plants and then ultimately move to the upper level of the food chain. So soil is the largest sulfur reservoir. It is followed by seas, then swamps, then marshes, as well as the volcanoes. So these can be considered as the sources. Now when exposed to air, this sulfur reacts with oxygen. So we know oxygen is present. So when this sulfur that is present is exposed to air, it produces sulfate, and now this sulfate is the form which is consumed by plants. So even plants can't consume the sulfur directly. It need to be break down. It need to be changed. This is this sulfate when this sulfur reacts with the oxygen that is present in the air, it is converted into sulfates. Now these sulfates are absorbed by the plants and microbes, and they convert it into organic form where they can use it. So I hope you have understood. These are the sources, then how it is changed, and which is the form which is then intake, which the plants intake. Of course, plants have taken this form of sulfate. Then there are this food chain. Herbivores will consume plants, then carnivores will consume these herbivores. So ultimately it will move towards the in the level of the food chain at the above level. So as animals consume those plants, sulfur is transported up the food chain and released when the organism die and disintegrate. So we have almost seen this decomposition procedure in every cycle, every nutrient cycle. So these are the sources, then this is the form which is consumed. Now let's move forward and see how it is present in atmosphere and what is the procedure of the intake. So the most frequent source of sulfur, we have seen various sources. So we are talking about atmosphere. We have atmosphere, we have biosphere, we have lithosphere, we have hydrosphere. Here we are talking about atmosphere. So the most frequent source of sulfur in atmosphere is sulfur dioxide, which is often created when humans burn fossil fuels. So we burn a lot of fossil fuels, so that these fossil fuels become a source of sulfur, because the most frequent source of sulfur, if we talk about atmosphere, is sulfur dioxide, which is SO2. So this is the most important source or most frequent source present in atmosphere. What is the most frequent source? Sulfur dioxide. And how do we get that sulfur dioxide? Through the burning of different fossil fuels. Now this volcanic activity contributes the rise in sulfur dioxide levels in the atmosphere. Then there is another source of sulfur as well in the environment, is hydrogen sulfide gas. Now this hydrogen sulfide gas, please pay attention on this, that this is a gas which is hydrogen, which also comprises of hydrogen. So this is hydrogen sulfide gas, and it is mostly created by a bacteria which act on dead inorganic matter when they, or decaying organic matter when through this process of decomposition. So these are the sources which contribute towards this, which contribute towards the release of sulfur in the atmosphere. It is mainly through these anthropogenic activities, which is burning of fossil fuels. From there we get sulfur dioxide. There are natural sources as well, which are these volcanic activities. From there also we get sulfur dioxide. And if we talk about another source, it is hydrogen sulfide gas, which is mostly created by the bacteria who act on these dead inorganic matter. Now this hydrogen sulfide is produced by the inorganic breakdown process in both terrestrial as well as the marine settings. And when hydrogen sulfide is oxidized in the air, sulfur dioxide is created. So this is how this hydrogen sulfide gas is converted into sulfur dioxide. So this is how this sulfur is present in atmosphere. Now moving towards next thing, how it is present in biosphere. So the sulfur then enters the biosphere either through the rocks, weathering or through the atmosphere. So how the sulfur went through or enters this biosphere? So it enters through weathering of rocks or through the atmosphere, and it aids. So this can be important, that what is the role of sulfur? It aids cloud formation by increasing the quantity and size of cloud droplets. So yes, it plays a role in the cloud formation. It increases the quantity and the size of the cloud droplets, and as a result the sulfur dissolves in rainwater and enters the biosphere as weak sulfuric acid droplets, which then results in acid rain. So this is how it enters. I hope you have understood that in atmosphere mostly it is present because of these anthropogenic activities, which is this burning of fossil fuels, then natural activities, which is this volcanic activities, then there is hydrogen sulfide gas, mostly used in industrial purposes, and when it combines with oxygen, then it creates this sulfur dioxide. So this is how it is present in atmosphere. Now this sulfur dioxide then enters sulfur then enters biosphere. How it enters biosphere? Through the weathering of rocks and or through either through the atmosphere. So these are the two processes through which it enters the biosphere. Now one more important thing which it can perform is it can help in this cloud formation. How it can help in cloud formation? It can increase the quantity and the size of these cloud droplets, and as a result this sulfur can get dissolved in rainwater and can turn into weak sulfuric acid droplets, and then it can come in the form of this acid rain. So this is how it is present in biosphere. Now how it is released? See, whatever the source is, sulfur in form of sulfates is taken by plants, then those plants are consumed by animals, and then it ultimately moves up the food chain. So this is how they consume it, and it is then incorporated through a series of metabolic process into sulfur bearing amino acid, and these sulfur bearing amino acid, we have seen the amino acid requires sulfur, then which and these amino acids are essential for the building block of protein. So it is then incorporated into this proteins of the autotroph. Autotroph are who can make their own food. So who are autotrophs? They are plants. So when plants consume sulfate through a series of metabolic process, it gets converted into these amino acid, and which is incorporated in the protein of these autotroph tissues. Now it then passes through the grazing food chain. That is how then our herbivores consume it, then our carnivores consume it, and sulfur bound in living organism is carried back to the soil. So how we have seen that soil is a great source of sulfur. How it is carried back to the soil? So when these plants and animals die, to the bottom of ponds and lakes and seas, through the excretion, decomposition of dead and organic material. So how it is converted back to the soil? Through excretion or this decomposition. And similarly if we talk about the lakes and seas, so this is how sulfur moves throughout this cycle, how it is consumed by plants and the form in which it is consumed by plants. So I hope you have understood this much. Now let's understand or summarize it with this diagram. It will be very easy for you to grab. You just need to remember the sources, otherwise the procedure it is almost same for every cycle, and I hope you have understood this, and I really hope that you have watched the previous classes, so it will be very easy for you to understand. So this is the diagram. See, through this weathering of rocks, it enters water in the form of this sulfate only, and then it is converted into the sulfide form. Those are then converted into this fossil fuels, and when we burn this fossil fuels, we have seen that mostly the sulfur is released through this. So when the burning of fossil fuel takes place, the sulfur is released. Now then there is sulfate, there are fertilizers which the farmers apply to their crops. One of them is this sulfate fertilizer. So through this fertilizer runoff also the sulfur enters in this water, and through the leaching also it enters into this water body, and through the surface runoff or weathering of rocks it enters through the water body. So these are some sources through which the sulfur enters the water body. And if we talk about the sulfate fertilizer, so sulfur is essential for plants, so definitely the farmer need to apply it to the soil if the soil is not having enough sulfur. So when they apply this sulfate fertilizer, then it is converted into sulfate by plants, then that sulfate is consumed by the plants, then those plants are consumed by animals, and then when they die or decompose, then it is converted into organic sulfur, and through this decomposition it is converted into fossil fuels, and ultimately when we burn fossil fuels, then again this sulfur is released. So this is the process, how it carries out, how the sulfur rotates, how the what are the sources of the sulfur and how they rotate through this atmosphere as well as biosphere. Also you can see the volcanization. This volcano also emits sulfur. We have seen it that in atmosphere it contributes to this sulfur thing, and sometimes it results in this precipitation or acid rain. So you have seen through this rain also it comes down to the atmosphere. So I hope you have summarized the whole thing in a very crisp manner and you have understood it. Now this is a question which was asked in your prelims examination. Let's see it. With reference to agricultural soils, so here we are talking about these soils and predominantly agricultural soils. Consider the following statement. So we need to consider, we need to see the statement. Let's see the statement. A high content of organic matter in soil drastically reduces its water holding capacity. So this, first of all, this is a very extreme word, that a high content of organic matter will drastically reduce the water holding capacity. Let's see statement number 2. Soil does not play any role in sulfur cycle. And let's see statement 3. Irrigation over a period of time can contribute to salinization of some agricultural lands. Now we have 4 options. Always read when you are solving a question, always read all the 3 statements, then have a glance at the options which are given, then go back to the statement and let's see which of the statement you know. So start from statement number 2. We have studied about it, that soil does not play any role in the sulfur cycle. Is it true? No, soil does play a role in the sulfur cycle. So this statement is wrong, and they have asked which statement is correct. So we can eliminate 2 options where this statement number 2 is given. Now we are left, the work is easy for us. We are only left with 2 options. See, and in both these options, one thing is common, which is 3. So what does option number 3 says? Irrigation over a period of time can contribute to salinization of some agricultural lands. So it is true if we go by the options, and then we are still left with one more option, statement number 1. So I hope I've made it easy for you to arrive at these 2 options. Now just give a thought and see why irrigation over a period of time can cause salination. And statement 1, is it true or not? A high content of organic matter in soil can drastically reduce the water holding capacity. So just give a thought and leave the answer in the comment box, and I hope you have found this session helpful as well as interesting. And if you have found it helpful, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.